Welcome back to In the Midst. Today I want to begin what I think is going to be a multi-part series on something that is essential in marriage, but it doesn't get talked about. So this is going to be a series on intimacy and the many things that involves. Like I said, this is something I don't feel like is talked about, especially in the church. So the church says, really we focus on, and maybe it's not all churches, but we've been in a few churches, and I kind of feel like this is just the whole Christian idea, is that intimacy is physical sex, and sex outside of marriage is wrong. Once you get married, you're allowed to have sex, enjoy it. God gave it to us. Good luck, have fun, figure it out, don't talk about it. That's not really helpful to anybody. So I want to look at, yes, that's true. It is supposed to be within the bounds of marriage, but there's so much more to intimacy than that. So that is where I want to start. Intimacy is sexual and non-sexual, or physical and non-physical. It's different for everyone, and that's okay. Men are, less emotional than we are. So that looks a little different, even from person to person, couple to couple. And that's okay. Nothing that I'm going to say here is a one size exactly fits all, and there is no variation, and I am going to cover everything and have it all figured out. I don't. But in 13 and a half years of marriage, there are some things that we've learned. So, like I said, intimacy is not just sex. However, both physical sexual intimacy and non-physical, non-sexual intimacy are both very, very, very important in your marriage, and they really do kind of build one upon another. So marriage needs more than physical sexual intimacy to survive, but a marriage without it isn't doing very good either. So, there has to be a balance. And one of the biggest things that I would say, especially to wives, especially the newly married, but really to anybody, is make sure you're saying yes more than you're saying no. And this is not getting into, health problems, physical problems, things like that. But just overall, make sure you're saying yes. So part of intimacy is being vulnerable. And that's hard. That takes effort. So we must strive to be vulnerable in all areas, to be completely transparent with your spouse. This takes time. One of the things that I didn't know, I wasn't taught, and I wish I was or would have been told this, is just because you're married doesn't mean you are giving 100% trust to your spouse or getting it. Just because you're married doesn't mean your spouse trusts you with every single, detail of their heart and their past and their hurts and their history and their wants and all these things. Even though you're married and you're one, it still takes time for them to be ready to share that with you. They have a history before you. There's things that they endured and went through and learned, and maybe there's trauma that they're just not ready to share yet. Maybe the death of someone close to them really hurt them and they're still trying to struggle. They miss that person. It can be anything, not just intimacy related. So there's things that they're not ready to talk about. And you have to be okay with that and encourage it, but also respect those boundaries. And as the spouse that isn't ready to talk about it, you have to make sure spiritually that you're working through those things to get to a place to share it with your spouse. You don't have to share it with just any and everyone, but you should be working toward complete openness with your spouse. So in the areas of communication, feelings, struggles, wants, needs, being open with all those things, that is intimacy. Genesis 2:25 says, and they were both naked, the man and the woman, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. There was nothing hidden between Adam and Eve. This is hard for some of us. We don't want our spouse to see our body because we're not comfortable with it. That's not how they felt. They were not ashamed. It takes courage, it takes trust, and it takes respect. Those are part of intimacy that have to be built and nurtured every single day in order to have that open communication, to have that, physical, sexual intimacy often. If you're spending the day downgrading each other and arguing and yelling and screaming, no one's going to be ready for intimacy at night or, at the end of the day when you get home, whatever. So all of this, like I said, it all goes together. You will not be physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually transparent with your spouse without trust, respect, and courage. Trust and respect build confidence. When I feel loved and appreciated and safe and secure in my marriage, I am more likely to open up, to share the hurts, to share something my husband said that hurt me, or he said to me that I didn't like, or something he's done, or something that somebody else has done, or maybe something from my past that I just haven't been ready to share yet. When you have that confidence in your spouse, it makes this so much easier. So you have to be willing to build that confidence with your spouse, be a person that they can be confident in, and be willing to open up when your spouse is doing, the things that they should, to welcome that intimacy, that courage, that vulnerability. You have to be willing to take a step and let them have it. So it takes time. And when they're working and they're trying and, you guys are just coming together as one in these areas, you've got good communication, that's building the foundation for this openness, this transparency. Who doesn't want that in their marriage, right? No one wants to be married to someone they're not comfortable being themselves around. That's just the way it is. Like I said, ladies, your husband wants to see your body as much as you want him to just sit and talk and listen. Men are visual, physical. We are emotional. As much as you want that, he wants you to be comfortable so he can see you and enjoy you. And, whether it leads to sex or not, that's just one of those things that they desire. And for the husband, we just want you to listen. We want that time together. Sometimes for a wife, that's how your confidence is boosted, is he is hearing you. We are connecting emotionally. And then that's how it's a process. We are our own biggest critics. So we need their confidence booster in our life. Some men aren't very good at this, to say, thank you for, making dinner, or taking care of the kids or the house, or thank you for getting groceries today, or, thank you for the way you take care of me, whatever it may be. My husband is pretty good at this, and I believe some of it comes naturally and some of it he has to think and say, thank you for doing this. And if your husband isn't, if he's not good at it, he hasn't done it in a while, just ask him, is there anything you want me to do differently? Are you still okay with how things are? And if he's like, yeah, why? What is it? Then just say, I just need you to say thank you. I just need you to say thank you sometimes. And let him know that you need that. There will be days when you don't want to share what's on your mind. You're still trying to process it. It's a lot. Maybe it just doesn't all make sense to you. Maybe you don't know how to verbalize it. You had a bad day at work. Maybe your spouse said something that put you in a bad mood and you're not ready to be like, hey, let's talk about this. That's okay. However, I think as people, we generally try to avoid hard conversations. We don't want to say, hey, you did this and it hurt me. We don't want to feel like we're attacking somebody or accusing them of something. I imagine your spouse probably, doesn't normally just intentionally say things to hurt you. So when we say, you said this, it's hard to kind of process that. We don't want it to turn into an argument. We try to say maybe it wasn't a big deal, things like that. But answering your spouse, having honest, open communication that's done kindly and in the right time, like we've talked about before, is going to increase that transparency. It's going to keep those lines of communication open. Part of creating trust and transparency is maintaining privacy. In the day in which we live, we have constant communication, constant access to anyone and everyone, and they have that with us. If your spouse does not feel like they can come to you with something and it stays between the two of you, they will not come to you. A private life is a happy life. Yes, there are times for advice and counsel, and we want to share the good things, and that's great. But if your spouse comes to you and says, hey, I'm struggling with this, or whatever, I want to change this in our marriage, or you said this to me, and the first thing we do is we get on social media, we send a message, we call our mom, we call our best friend and say, you're not going to believe what he said to me today. You're not going to believe what he said he's struggling with. Why would he come to you with anything else? This is why the number of men that are the victim in domestic violence and the number of men that struggle with depression and suicidal thoughts, we don't know that number, because very, very, very many, most of the cases of this situation, it gets turned around negatively on them. Women get the help, women get the attention, women get the counseling. But when the man comes forward and says, hey, I'm struggling with this, he's told to man up, boss up, get over it, and move on, and no one listens to him. And then, like Will Smith, he's a meme on social media, and everyone's making fun of him on the internet world. Why would they put themselves out there and come to us with that? If they can't trust you, they're not going to. So then us women are going, he doesn't ever open up. He doesn't ever blah, blah, blah. Well, if you've broken that trust, he's not going to. He doesn't want the world to know. He wanted you to know. You are his best friend, his wife, his life partner. He should be able to trust you with those things. But if he can't, he won't let himself be opened up a second time to that hurt, shame, and embarrassment. So you have to be very, very careful with what your husband is coming to you with, and keep it between you. So as a wife, your job, your responsibility biblically to the Lord, to your husband, is to submit, to support, to serve, to encourage, to pray for him. You are his helpmeet. You are supposed to be his biggest support. And if you're not, he's going to know that, and that's going to build up this wall. Trying to stick to my notes here, or this is going to just be all over the place. Genesis 2:24, Adam said, through inspiration of God, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. As much as you want to protect your innermost struggles, thoughts, desires, you don't want the world to know, you have to treat his the same way. You are one flesh. If you wouldn't talk down about yourself, and if you're not quick to share your imperfections, don't share his. All of us that are married, we're married about 3 seconds, and we realize there is something I don't like about you. But don't let that take away from the 97% of him that you love, because Satan is going to use that and get your vision turned around on the little things, on the few things that you don't like, on his imperfections. But if he were to exploit your imperfections like that, you wouldn't like it. So we have to remember to treat others the way we want to be treated. This still applies in your marriage. Sharing negative details with others will always be there, whether it's on social media, whether it's a text, a phone call. Those are the things, if that's all you're sharing, and even if it's not, we tend to remember the negative. That's just how we're made. Especially with your family and those on social media, when they see your spouse, when they hear about your spouse, when they think about your spouse, the negative is what they're going to associate him with. And that should not be the image that we're creating for others to have about our spouse. You should be talking about your spouse like they are just the best person ever, and how much you love them, and how honorable they are, and respectable they are, and how kind they are, and funny, and loving, and smart, and all these things. They don't need to know that your husband never puts his socks in the hamper, okay? It's really not a big deal. They don't need to know that he always leaves his plate on the table after dinner, or whatever the thing is that's driving you crazy. No one needs to know that. When you have an argument, again, if you are going to others, the argument's what they're going to remember. Most of the time, your family, your friends are going to take your side. Not always. Sometimes they take the spouse's side, and that's okay. But we don't always go back and say, I was wrong about this. We made up. We're fine. I blew this out of proportion. I didn't have the whole story. I might have exaggerated. We don't always go back and do that. So the image that is kept for them is this argument. And now it's like, man, they always fight. And why does he talk to her that way? And whatever the case may be, we're not sharing the good side. Social media is a highlight reel. Remember that. It's not real life. It's a highlight reel. And the highlight reel that you need to be portraying is the good things. It's what God's doing in your heart, in your life, in your marriage, in your church. It's the happy pictures of the kids getting ready for church or basketball games. It's date night with you and your husband. It's not the arguments and he's home late from work again and he missed a basketball game again and, the kids are fighting again. Listen, we're all working too much and all of our kids are fighting. It's not just you. It's okay. So Adam said this phrase that therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife and they should be one flesh. They didn't have earthly parents. And yet he said this. God put this in his heart and mind to say, kept it in scripture to remind us how important our spouse is. Privacy is important. We must seek, which is work, to build trust and transparency in our marriage by maintaining privacy. A common misconception, like I said, is we think trust and respect are not earned. They are. While yes, you are to respect your husband because he is your husband. But that respect level is going to build over time. I respect my husband and love my husband much more today than I did when we got married. That's just through time. That's through growth. That's through maturity. But that trust has to be built. Yes, you trusted each other enough to have a relationship, to date, to get engaged, to get married, but it's going to continue to build. Like I said, your spouse isn't going to trust you with every deep, dark secret and hurt that they have on day one. So be intentional. It takes a second to break that trust, but it takes a lifetime to build it back. It takes years to build it back. You don't want to have to go through that. It's much easier just to continue to build it, continue to have it, rather than to risk it and break it. So trust is fragile. Remember to handle it with care. We can't force trust. We just have to be patient and pray about it and be a person of integrity that our spouse wants to trust with their opening up feelings and emotions and thoughts that they can trust us with. Proverbs 31 talks about her husband does safely trust in her. That's how the wife should be. Is the husband, yes, the wife should be able to trust the husband as well, but I wish I had my Bible in front of me to say the exact verse because now it's not in my mind. I can't pull the verse out of my thoughts, but you want your husband to trust you. You want him to feel safe with you. So this just takes time and effort. You have to find what works for you. Getting married does not fix everything. If you're arguing and not getting along, you're not trusting each other, you're not spending a lot of time together, and you think, we'll get married, then he has to stay, and we have to work on this, and it's going to make things better because now there's more commitment. It's not how that works. If your relationship is rough while you're dating and engaged, signing that piece of paper and putting on that ring is not going to fix it. This takes time and effort. Marriage is not a magical event that makes you or your spouse perfect. Everything will not come naturally when you are married, but this does not mean your marriage was a mistake. Too many people think, I shouldn't have to force it. It shouldn't be this hard. We're not meant to be. And that's not biblical. That's not the case. You get to choose. You get to choose to love your spouse. You get to choose to build your home, to build that trust, to build respect each and every day. You get to make your marriage a priority by being willing to put in the work, to be transparent, open, honest with your spouse. It's not easy, but it's always, always worth it. And God's going to bless that. He blesses our efforts. He blesses our heart's desires when they match His, when they match Scripture. And to be vulnerable with your spouse, to be one, to become closer. When you put that effort into your marriage, to be a spouse that's trustworthy, that's respectable, that's kind, that's honorable, God's going to bless that. And so will your spouse and your children. That's what the Proverbs 31 woman's all about. Her husband and her children call her blessed. And God blessed her and rewarded her. She was rewarded for the kind of woman that she was. So even though it's hard, I know it's hard. And I know sometimes we don't see that fruit day to day of the things we're doing that should be earning that trust and respect. Not everybody responds the same way. Just because you would have been ready to share something and open up by now doesn't mean your husband is. And you just have to be patient with that. And the best way to do it is to pray. Nagging will not change him. Nagging and pushing and forcing. Nagging is not a spiritual gift. Prayer is. Patience is. Long-suffering is. Love is. Gentleness, goodness, kindness, faith, meekness. Those are gifts. That is a fruit of the Spirit. That is the fruit of the Spirit that we all should have. These are not just things that we show when we feel like it, when we think we can, when we muster up enough energy. And these are not things that are just for everyone else. Your spouse should be seeing these the most. So I hope this was a help and an encouragement to you. There will be more parts to come. We will get more into intimacy in the future. So until then, stay in the Word, stay close to the shepherd, and let him lead you in paths of righteousness.